Hi, my name is Ethan Anderson. I am a HS3 or corpsman stationed here in Portsmouth, Virginia, and I'd like to talk about something I noticed last summer. I went up north about 40 minutes to go to a beach in an attempt to go swimming with some friends. We're on the beach, people are in the water everywhere, there's dogs, kids, everybody's having a fantastic time, and there's signs up that say swim at your own risk due to contamination. So when we got the opportunity to talk about something that affected our area for this class, I immediately jumped on pollution. I wanted to know more about the issue, why it was happening, why nobody wanted to swim in the water, or why they were swimming in dirty water, and then find a possible solution. So to kind of explain the area a little bit, there's multiple states that border the Chesapeake Bay, and it's gigantic. According to NOAA, it houses over 18 million people in the basin, and it's used mostly for transportation of goods up and down, moving them through cities. It's used a lot for recreation and fishing. So there's two main factors into the pollution in this area. There is in the open ocean, once you're 3 miles out at sea, you're able to dump sewage. I was on a Coast Guard boat for a couple of years. The second you pass that 3 mile line, you're dumping, right? Whether that's ethical or not, that's what happens. It was a major port for the Navy, and for goods being moved, that's not going to change. The other source of pollution coming down the Chesapeake Bay is, according to Duncan R. Scott, who published an article specifically about the troubles that the Chesapeake Bay is having. He explained that it's mostly nitrogen runoff from the fertilizers used for all the farms. Since Chesapeake Bay is so big, all of the streams in the area end up in it in one way or another. So all these farms that, use all these fertilizers, it all makes its way to the Chesapeake Bay. And the biggest problem with that nitrogen is the algae that breeds, because the algae gets the fertilizer and just goes crazy, and that's what's making the water unsafe. All this talk of pollution and, the nitrogen runoff, the sewage dumping sounds scary. However, there is a solution. It's oysters. I know that sounds a little corny, right? That oysters are going to save the day, but in reality, they are perfect for this situation, right? Virginia Beach and the Chesapeake Bay need to implement sustainable oyster farms in order to combat pollution, create artificial reefs, and assist with the liming of the farms in the area. Oysters are incredibly effective at filtering out the algae in this area. In a study done by Wessenberger and Gilbert, completed in 2021, two biologists, it took about 2 years, and they looked at different oysters populations up and down the Chesapeake Bay. And what they found was this harmful algae was in the digestive tracts of all of them, right? They were all feeding on this bad algae. And in areas where there were large quantities of oysters, there were actually less of this algae found. A direct correlation that this is the solution. The most effective way to get these oysters in the water in advantageous areas is through artificial reefs. Artificial reefs are typically made of rebar and concrete, and then they're seeded with hundreds and maybe even thousands of oysters, and they're dropped in advantageous spots for oyster growth. Now, not only did this grow tons of oysters, but it provides a new ecosystem, essentially creating a new reef for fish to feed on. Mollusks also will make them their home sometimes, but most importantly, it stops coastal erosions. These reefs provide another barrier that waves will dissipate energy on, and then when it comes to hitting real reefs or breaking down on the beach, it lowers it and allows those reefs and that to be less eroded. In a study done in 2023 in the Gulf of Mexico, it found that it can dissipate waves up to 42 to 44% for these large reefs. Finally, and one of my favorite uses for the oysters is their shells. Once they're dead and the shells are not needed anymore, they can actually be ground up and used as liming substances for farming. So farming in America with the, farming of the same crop and soil over and over again has caused a steady loss of nutrients and has created problems for yield and can even get so bad it can lead to soil toxicity. So liming is the use of a heavy calcified substance, and you just put it in there and it'll up the pH and the calcium and essentially revitalize the soil. So in a study done in 2022 that looked specifically at the effectiveness of liming with the oyster shells, it was found that there was a 59% average improvement in the amount of calcium in the soil, and it raised the pH a whole level, which is huge, especially for, soil in this area. Once you go up north, we grow a lot of crops there. So it's definitely very important. According to an article published by Zurich in 2019, there's a 1.2-mile dead zone in the middle of Chesapeake Bay. So there's so little oxygen left that nothing is living, right? And this is only going to grow and become worse if we don't make a change. And clearly the changing of the amount of fertilizers used by farms didn't work. We're not going to be able to change the distance at which boats are able to drop sewage. I don't think that's remotely realistic. 100% for this area, we need to use these sustainable oyster farms in order to combat the erosion that's leading to extra sediment. We need the water filtered out, especially the dangerous algae. And we need to help revitalize the soil so they don't have to use as much fertilizer through a liming substance.